Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Monday. Thanks so much for tuning in. We've got a great show for the folks today. I believe, Jessica, why don't you take it away?
We are less than 3 months out from the presidential election, and Vice President Kamala Harris has a very important edge over former President Donald Trump. Harris leads Trump by 4 points in 3 key swing states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, according to a New York Times Siena College survey. It's a remarkable turn for the Democratic Party. Before President Biden dropped out, Biden and Trump were pretty much tied in Michigan and Wisconsin, and Trump was leading in Pennsylvania. According to the survey, voters view Harris as more intelligent and temperamentally fit to govern, more so than Trump. Harris also has a 24-point advantage for voters on abortion, and Harris also has gained ground for the Democratic Party with young voters and black voters, both key parts of the Democrats' coalition. Now, the polls also show Harris's running mate pick, Governor Tim Walz, is performing better than Trump's pick, Senator J.D. Vance. 48% of voters said they were excited about Walz, compared to just 43% for Vance.
But it's worth noting voters prefer Trump when it comes to handling the economy and immigration. Plus, 42% of voters said that Harris is too liberal, while only 37% had the same to say about her predecessor on the ticket, Joe Biden, the presumed Democratic nominee, until recent events. Now, the New York Times points out that it's unclear how much of Harris's bounce in the polls stems from heightened excitement surrounding her jump to the top of the ticket and whether that momentum will actually last. Meanwhile, Trump is also having to deal with a hack over the weekend. Trump's campaign said some of its internal communications had actually been hacked. The announcement came after Politico reported they had been receiving emails from an anonymous account with documents from inside Trump's operation. Trump's campaign blamed Iran and said that that foreign adversary had intended to interfere with the 2024 election, sow chaos throughout our democratic process. Campaign cited a Microsoft report that found Iranian hackers had sent a spear phishing email in June to a high-ranking official on a presidential campaign, though the identity of the campaign hacker had not been independently confirmed. Now, according to Politico, they were getting these documents from this hacker.
Robert.
Yes. Where was I at the time? The hacker is going by the name Robert. The documents apparently pertain to J.D. Vance, including early vetting materials on him, which were labeled by the Trump campaign. So it's basically the Trump campaign going through all his previous statements. And they had labeled some of them, according to Politico, as potential vulnerabilities, particularly the criticisms he'd had of Trump previously. It's also clear from these hacked materials, again, according to Politico, we've not viewed them ourselves, and Politico is not publishing them, given the potentially illegal origins of them. But Marco Rubio was also in the vetting documents. So Trump,
Right.
The Trump campaign says this was the responsibility of Iran. Iran is responsible for it, which aligns with what Microsoft has said about the hack.
Right. And of course, a lot of news sources are willing to publish leaks if they get them, but if they're obtained illegally, there's some recourse potentially if they publish them. Robert, if that's his real name, said, "I suggest you don't be curious about where I got them from. Any answer to this question will compromise me and also legally restricts you from publishing them." So by saying that, Politico, out of an abundance of caution, has decided not to show what they have, which is apparently court documents, internal campaign documents, and this dossier on what could potentially be a political liability regarding J.D. Vance. It would be funny to know what they think a liability is surrounding the Vance campaign and what actually, became a liability around his candidacy as vice president. But to blame this on Iran, and Trump is saying, I'm so strong on Iran. They were not a powerful country when I was president, and that's why they want to get me, because they don't want to be president. It's an interesting way to spin this for Trump. I think we're all curious what's in there, but I don't think we're going to get to see any of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's anything. We don't know yet that there's anything in there that we don't already know. Politico is alluding to Vance's past statements, his criticisms of Trump. We already know that he called Trump Hitler and a bunch of other names when he was a never-Trumper back before Trump won in 2016. So none of that is new information. But, Politico is not publishing the exact stuff, which I have to say is they're not, I would argue they're not required to not publish it. They didn't, it's almost like WikiLeaks. They didn't steal the documents. The documents were given to them by someone who stole them. That person could be prosecuted. But if you obtain information, if the process was illicit, but journalists do publish information that was obtained illicitly, as long as they're not complicit in the crime of how it was obtained. Just as when Russia, the hacking of the DNC and the Hillary Clinton stuff, that was again the information. Everyone's like, oh, that's Russian interference. Again, yes, it is a crime what the hackers did, but the information given to you was real information. It was not made up. It was not fabricated. It was true information. Pertaining to Hillary Clinton. So just as this would be true information about J.D. Vance. Now, I think it's information we largely already know, so it's moot, but it's not, Politico does not have a responsibility, I would argue, to not publish it.
There might be some new stuff in there you don't know, Robbie. Or maybe you do know, Robert. But I like that you brought up Hillary Clinton because many people are saying, people on the internet
many people are saying
that the Trump campaign this time around bears, reminiscence of the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign.
What, in that it's doomed?
A party frontrunner, crushed opponents in a nasty primary.
Yeah.
Portrayed as the inevitable winner despite everyone hating him. Forgets to campaign in swing states. Dismisses opponents' crowd signs
He's campaigning in swing states. He got shot in a swing state.
And most importantly and recently have emails hacked and leaked.
I guess. Look, things in Trump world, people are not happy right now with how the campaign is being run. I'm seeing a lot of, many people are saying, I'm seeing a lot of grumbling from connected Republicans with how the campaign is being handled, with what it's focusing on. I will say Kamala Harris is up a couple points in these swing states. We do have to remember that in the 2020 election, Joe Biden was up by as many as 7 points at various times, and it ended up being very much closer than that. So even if she's up, she is clearly doing better than Joe Biden was a month ago. That's, we'll not discount that. But it is still very close. Either side could win this election. It takes focus and determination. And the Trump people have to work on that. Now, I just saw some breaking news this morning. Trump is suing the Justice Department for $100 million for the Mar-a-Lago raid. They're saying that was interference with his business operations, tortious interference. It's a common civil suit terminology, and so that just got announced this morning.
Very interesting to see what's going to come of that. Maybe he's desperate for cash. Who knows?
Well.
I think that, seeing his rather lax campaign schedule comparatively, when asked about this, he says, I'm going to let them have their convention. I'm not going to, bother trying to hold rallies when they're doing their own thing. I don't really get that. I feel like you should campaign while the convention's happening. I don't really understand that as a reason for why his schedule's thinned out so much. But my dad did warn me, be careful doing anything with Kamala because there's these AI crowds that are following her around. And
yes,
we're gonna very scary.
We're gonna talk more about the crowds later on the show.
I think that's probably a reason why his schedule has thinned out. I think he doesn't want to be in a situation where people are comparing their crowd sizes. I will say, he's been campaigning for longer than she has, and there's some excitement to want to go to a rally for a candidate you've never had the chance to before. I'm sure a lot of Trump supporters have been to his rallies in the past, so I don't think it's something that will determine who the winner is, what these crowd sizes are. I do think internally it is making them feel very bad and sad.
Well, Kamala is benefiting from massive fawning media coverage right now. The media is it loves her campaign, is all about it. They had soured on Biden. Biden was getting no favors from the media, and then in fact he was getting some of the most intensely negative press coverage that a Democrat has ever gotten in like our lifetimes because they wanted to force him from the ticket, which they succeeded in doing, and now they've fallen back in line behind her. And so everything is. I just saw her on the cover of Time this morning. It says her moment. That kind of stuff. We're getting Barack Obama level historical milestone appreciation for Kamala Harris, and that's worth something. It's not going to decide the election necessarily, but it's worth a lot. But you're right that not everyone is thrilled with Trump, although it's interesting, again, to look at the policies. Except for abortion, if you look at the policies, people want Trump's policies. They want his economic policies. They want his immigration policies. The only area, and it's a decisive win, to be clear, but is abortion. Other than that, people want to return to Trump policies, but maybe they don't want a return to Trump himself is going to be the deciding question of this election. Will people ultimately decide they want Trump's policies, warts and all, even if that means 4 more years of Donald Trump himself, or whether they just can't do it?
Well, what's interesting is the polling shows that, yes, people want Trump's policies, but how these questions are asked matters more. Is the question actually representative of real policies Donald Trump has committed to this time around and things that he supported when he was president or got done as president? If they straight up ask the American people, are you okay with corporate profits being cut, their taxes being cut by a higher margin than taxes have been cut for working and middle class families? Are you in support of the corporate tax cuts lasting beyond 2025 when the middle class and working class tax cuts expire? People would not be in support of that. And that's one of the biggest impacts the Trump presidency has had on the economy. I do think some of the media coverage is because there's organic support of Kamala Harris, and the media likes giving people what they want to see. We saw social media blow up in support of Kamala Harris. That's not something that's controlled by corporations or the mainstream. That's organic support among people. She has a favorability rating of 47.5%. Trump in 2016, before he won the presidency, was down at 34%.
And social media sites are corporations.
I would not, but their corporations cannot control what users are posting on social media.
They can. Yes, they can, and they do, and
they
can
don't
influence.
They cannot tell people you have to
what...
post about Kamala Harris. They do not do that.
No, but they can re-up and promote posts in favor of one person or the other.
We haven't seen any evidence of that happening. Okay. We have seen many young people posting on TikTok, posting on Twitter, posting on Instagram.
You don't think X, because it's owned by Elon Musk, is maybe boosting right-wing stuff?
I think I've seen things on my timeline that I've never interacted with before, but we've also seen organically the Coconut Army take over Twitter. So I think Kamala Harris has a lot of support and excitement right now. And I think, maybe the mainstream media is reflecting what their viewers want to see. They want to see this new campaign. They want to see coverage of it. And she is very popular right now.
I think they're reflecting what they want to see, but we will continue paying attention to this. More Rising in just a minute.
President Joe Biden gave his first interview since ending his 2024 campaign. In the exclusive sit-down with CBS News' Robert Acosta, Biden recounts the days leading up to his historic decision, telling Costa he only intended to be a transition president. Here's the president in his own words. Let's watch.
A number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. And the combination was that I thought it was a critical issue for me, still is, not a joke, maintaining this democracy. But I thought it was important because although it's a great honor being president, I think I have an obligation to the country to do the most important thing to do, and that is we must defeat Trump.
But in the weeks since bowing out of the race, Biden has kept a very low profile, leading some to wonder, where is Joe Biden? Well, this weekend, he was seen cycling in his go-to vacation spot, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. What has the president really been up to since being pushed out of the campaign trail? On July 21st, Biden, of course, announced his departure.
But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
Days before dropping out, Biden caught COVID at a Las Vegas campaign stop in mid-July. He promptly flew to his Delaware home to quarantine. Days later, he made the bombshell announcement, then continued to self-isolate for a few weeks after that. Biden made big appearances after meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when he visited Washington on July 25th. In the beginning of August, he spoke from the White House on Russia's release of Paul Whelan, Evan Gershkovich, and other Americans who had been imprisoned there. Now his official schedule appears to be clear, with the exception of a joint appearance he and now Democratic nominee Kamala Harris are supposed to make in Maryland later this week. Biden is expected to deliver a speech on lowering costs for Americans. According to reports, Biden's aides are fleshing out his final months in the Oval Office with the focus on reducing health care, housing costs, and his infrastructure law, plus helping out the Harris campaign. So that sounds like he has a busy schedule, although we've seen very little of him. I think it's interesting that he now says he always intended to be a transition president. He did say that in the beginning, but he was certainly, up until a month and a half ago, running for re-election. He was not intending to make the transition now, but he admits he was forced to make this decision because other senior Democratic leaders explained to him that he was hurting the ticket because he seems too old. I think he is bitter about it, which is understandable. I'd be bitter about it in his position, having had my entire party turn on me, the media turn on me, my donors turn on me. That's how it goes, I guess.
I do remember Biden saying, I'm a transition candidate. I want to usher in some return to normalcy in our politics post-Trump.
So normal.
A lot of us didn't think he would run for a second term. The fact that he did and he dropped out this late is a disappointment. If he was a transition candidate, let the party have a primary. He didn't do that. And I think a lot of people are disappointed in that decision. I think he is someone who ran for the presidency so many times, and it's something he wanted really badly. And once he got that power, he wanted to keep it. And he should not have, for the betterment of the party and the values supposedly he has that he's fighting for that motivate him to do public service at all. I do think it's rich that he's clearing $3.5 billion in munitions to Israel at a time when he says his focus is reducing costs for Americans, and when his official schedule is extremely limited and has been over the past week. And so I have a lot of questions about why he's starting his day at 10 and his last official meeting or appointment is 2 p.m. I think that people deserve a little bit more from him in his final months here, if that's really his focus.
You're absolutely right. I don't think he's able to give more. I mean, look at him in these interviews. Yeah. He doesn't have the excuse anymore that he has COVID or that he's sick. He is supposedly well, and he does not. And now these are not high-pressure interviews anymore because this is not, he has to make his case for why he should be reelected. He looks and sounds so old and so out of touch, and I have to again ask whether he is truly and actually capable of being president now. People who watch this are going to be having that question. He seems far too old to be in public life. I mean, he can still be in public life, but while occupying the most important job in the world, the most high-demanding, most stressful job, with everything, all hell breaking loose in the Middle East, war in Ukraine, partly able to invade Russia, right? Just a few days ago. These are very serious, pivotal national security matters for our allies around the globe, with rivals around the globe. We need someone with all of their mental faculties who can wake up at any hour of the night and confidently field questions, engage with military leaders, engage with the leaders of foreign countries, plan a strategy, and this guy just does not sound like he's up to that task at all. Is that unfair? I don't think it's unfair.
I don't think it's unfair. I have questions about Trump's light schedule as well. This guy is going to be much older than Biden is today, 3 years into his term. I'm worried about that. He goes on the campaign trail, and there are people who compile the transcript of the speeches. The way he is portraying the economy and inflation is very interesting to me. I'm calling it Bacon-gate. It's a term coined by Josh Frankel.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, he produces a lot of analysis. And so he assessed the price of bacon on average in the United States.
Okay.
And when Donald Trump has portrayed it inaccurately, he said it has quadrupled to being 6 times the price it was when Biden took office. 5 times, 4 times. He says these things throughout his stump speeches when the price of bacon has not been anywhere higher on average in the United States than 30% more than it was in January 2021, let alone 400 to 600% higher. People are struggling to pay for groceries, but in Trump's world, if prices were 4 to 6 times higher, we would be experiencing rampant hyperinflation. Like, portraying Biden's economy in this way is kind of dangerous economic misinformation. And the fact that he thinks people will struggle to afford groceries only when things become 4 to 6 times higher, everyone would be starving if that were the case. Things being 30% higher is enough for people to not be able to afford groceries. He doesn't need to say 6 or 4 times higher, but he's very obsessed with the price of a pound of bacon.
I'm looking at the U.S. inflation calculator, and it looks to me like the price of bacon is up, but it is not up 4 times, no.
Yeah, I'm very interested in how many times he mentions the price of a pound of bacon. This is a guy who deregulated the pork industry. So bacon is important to him.
Prices down.
But also another hilarious theory is that this is what he's paying at Mar-a-Lago, and he's getting gypped by the guys he helped deregulate the industry. So I find that very interesting. But Biden doesn't have a packed schedule trying to get prices down, so this is what we have. A guy who absolutely is misrepresenting the current state of the economy, and a guy who isn't doing enough to address the current state of the economy.
You said twice now, though, that you don't think Trump is out there campaigning. He's doing rallies. He's visiting places. I mean, he's in the swing states. He just got shot in one of them, in fact.
Do you think that's why he has a thinned out schedule, though? Because he certainly does, and he's admitted this himself.
I mean, he has a robust schedule compared to Joe Biden.
And I don't know if I would agree with that.
Kamala Harris, by the way, is not doing any media interviews. She's said, when asked about if there's going to be a policy platform, she said, well, we'll get back to you. We're going to work on that next week.
She talked to the press on the tarmac. She did go up to press on the tarmac.
She hasn't done a sit-down interview.
I don't think she needs to do a sit-down interview when she's packed.
I think she does. I think she absolutely needs to do a sit-down interview. Nobody voted for her.
I'm not saying
Nobody selected
ever.
her. She didn't win anything. We don't know what she stands for or who she is or who she believes or what she's running on. She absolutely needs to do a sit-down interview.
I think it's great.
I see why she would want to avoid doing a sit-down interview.
She's stumping around and she's telling people her political positions. Sure, she can sit down with the media and do a longer interview, but right now it seems their focus is rallies.
They're just going to, she might as well, they're not going to ask her any tough questions. They're going to just talk about how great she is. But
okay, let's see Trump's schedule. So I know that he did a lot of rallies last month, the month that he was shot, but his new campaign schedule is lighter. So this is reporting from The Republic, and he said, I'm leading by a lot, I'm letting their convention go through, but I am campaigning a lot. And when they were asked if he was going to increase his travel to do at least 1 or 2 rallies a week, he said after the convention. Yeah. So he's admittedly not doing as many rallies as Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And a lot of people are asking what's going on. In 2016, Trump had 7 different rallies between August 9th and 13th. Now, J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, has had a busy schedule. He's been in Michigan, he's been in Wisconsin, he's going to North Carolina, and Trump has only visited Montana in the past week. And so that's a big difference from how he was campaigning in 2016 and what his running mate's been up to.
Well, I don't know. He should be more active, but again, Kamala Harris has not done a major media interview, and I have no idea if Joe Biden is capable of running the country or is actually running the country right now, and that is a very scary and sobering thought, I think. More Rising right after this. According to a shocking new report, former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard was placed on a terror watch list and was surveilled by teams of government agents. Federal Air Marshal whistleblower told Uncover DC that Gabbard was placed in the Quiet Skies program on July 23rd. That's a sinister name. For context, Quiet Skies is a TSA surveillance program that targets passengers who are not included in any terrorist database. According to the TSA, Quiet Skies is, quote, another tool that allows the Federal Air Marshal Service to more efficiently deploy law enforcement resources to focus on travelers who may present an elevated risk to aviation security. Uncover said that on every flight Gabbard boards, there are now 2 explosive detection canine teams, 1 transportation security specialist, 1 plainclothes TSA supervisor, and 3 federal air marshals.
Gabbard reacted to Uncover DC's report on Fox News. Let's watch that.
The very next day after my conversation with you on the air, warning the American people about how dangerous a Kamala Harris presidency would be, I was placed on this domestic terror watch list, which is called the Quiet Skies list under the Department of Homeland Security. The clear pain and real visceral hurt that comes from this is, as you mentioned, like many Americans, I enlisted because of the terrorist attacks on 9/11 to go after the Islamist terrorists who attacked us on that day, and to now have my own government now turn around and put me on a domestic terror watch list. It hits to the core and is the ultimate sense of betrayal. But we look at why they are doing this. It has a chilling effect. It sends a warning both to me and to anyone else who even thinks about daring to criticize our own government, which is a guaranteed protected right under the First Amendment.
Yeah.
That we will be subject to a violation of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy through this kind of surveillance. And that's the biggest stress that's been caused by this entire situation, Laura, is now forever. I will always be looking over my shoulder, wondering if and how our government in any of these different agencies is surveilling me, watching me.
Gabbard also told Matt Taibbi of Racket News that she has encountered numerous obstacles when flying. With us now to discuss all of this terrifying news, is Matt Taibbi himself, who wrote a terrific piece about Gabbard's ordeal and the Quiet Skies program. You can read that at Racket News. Matt, thank you so much for being back with us on Rising.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So this sounds like something straight out of Orwell. It's called Quiet Skies. Obviously, we've heard a little bit about it in the past, but this is the first, I think, high-profile person to be ensnared in it. Why don't you start by recapping what you heard from Tulsi herself about the really dramatic, and she is by no means the only victim of this program, but really obnoxious protocols put in place for her extensive travel.
Yeah, I think the first thing that people need to realize is that Quiet Skies is not, some kind of fantasy that's been cooked up at the edges of the internet or anything like that. The story, the existence of the program was disclosed 6 years ago in 2018. It came out in the Boston Globe. There was significant coverage of it back then. There were hearings in the Senate. Senator Ed Markey questioned the head of the TSA at the time, who admitted that thousands of Americans who were not even suspected of crimes were being followed under the program. There was a significant acceleration of the program after January 6th, when a number of people who were either in attendance inside the Capitol or just at the speech that day were placed in the program. And the major issue with this Quiet Skies program is that it places significant amount of government resources and air marshal personnel to follow people, but they're not trying to develop cases. They are just conducting surveillance. So this is a major problem with a lot of the stuff that happens in the war on terror programs. Because of that, they never have to justify, they never have to prove probable cause. And we don't know why, for instance, somebody like Tulsi Gabbard would be placed under surveillance, but we do know that the Quiet Skies is very excessive in terms of the number of people who are assigned to each selectee. That's what they call them. It's up to 3 marshals per flight. If you have 3 flights in a day, that will be 9 marshals. There can be as many as 15 people in an airport following a single person, plus canine sniffing, bomb sniffing dogs, which Tulsi was aware of. So it's a remarkable program.
So Quiet Skies, according to the TSA's website, they say it's another tool that allows Federal Air Marshal Service to more efficiently deploy law enforcement resources to focus on travelers who may present an elevated risk to aviation security. Is it possible that Tulsi Gabbard has been rather the victim of threats than perceived as a threat herself?
It's possible. When I reached out to the TSA, they sent me back a pro forma letter when I asked if she was even in the program. They essentially sent back a form letter saying, well, there are a variety of reasons a person can be matched to this program. It can mean anything. Your presence in the program doesn't automatically designate derogatory information. So we don't know exactly what it means. It could be somebody just sort of subjectively deciding that person is a threat and designating them a domestic terror threat. But it's, yeah, I think from Tulsi's point of view, she sees it as threatening and certainly as harassing. And I think possibly the program is designed to produce that effect in people. It's designed to make people feel that they're under surveillance.
Well, and she gets the quadruple S's on her boarding pass, which that stands for secondary security screening selection. And then she gets even more aggressive. And, this just started happening to her since she got placed on the Quiet Skies thing. She gets aggressive pat downs. I've been complaining that the pat downs at Ronald Reagan Airport, DCA, and Washington have gotten just absurdly violating of your personal space. But she's getting, they're going over all of her luggage. What she says, she travels light, thank goodness, but that they're going through all her, personal items and everything. So if she's this is not a way that you treat someone who's like a target of a safety or something. It's no, they're treating her like a threat. It's just, this is insane. This is completely insane. In addition to the civil liberties violations, the time and money this must be costing to run this kind of surveillance on people where they have a designated. For what reason? What do they expect? Isn't that what the ordinary TSA is for? To make sure no weapons supposedly are getting onto flights. But now there's an extra level of bureaucratic safety that costs a fortune, complete with dogs and all that. Well, what's the normal stuff for then?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And as Tulsi herself pointed out to me, if they really thought that she was an elevated threat for, something like a hijacking or a bombing of a plane, then why are they letting her on a plane at all?
Right.
That's a very strange question. You talked about the waste. There's actually an Inspector General report about Quiet Skies that was published in 2020, I believe, 2019 or 2020, that concluded that in the year they examined, the budget for the air marshals was $804 million, and they concluded that $394 million of that could have been, quote, better spent. You're talking about an enormous sum of money that is being allocated to these missions where, yes, you have to have multiple marshals at every point of travel, and they even have to have people standing by for contingencies, like if somebody's on a wait list for a flight, they have to get extra marshals for that. They follow people in and out of the plane. They go to see if they mark down if they're going to the bathroom, what they eat.
Oh my God.
What is all this for? Why are they doing this? It's in keeping with this, again, it's in keeping with this new conception of what the federal enforcement mechanism does, which is it is strictly an intelligence gathering and surveillance operation. Very often, it's not going towards trying to prosecute somebody for a crime like terrorism or conspiracy.
Is this like a psychological experiment or something? This is like in Lost, the people in the Pearl hatch that have to just watch the other people in the hatch and fill as many notebooks until they go insane. That's what it sounds like. This is crazy. Sorry to cut you off, Jessica.
It's important to note that, Tulsi Gabbard is someone that's been known for having ties with far-right leadership in India. She makes frequent commentary on foreign affairs. She says things that make me believe she would be a heightened target, and that could put other passengers at risk on the plane. But as Tulsi put it, it seems that she does not believe this was because she's, the victim of threats or she's someone that is a target. She said she's on the domestic terrorist list now. Does she have evidence of this? How did she find this out?
So this is an important question. I think you're asking a good question, because the reason this came out at all is two air marshals came forward. They came forward to an Air Marshals Association that it's not a union, but it sort of represents the interests of air marshals and things like workers' comp complaints and whistleblower complaints. And there have been a lot about this program dating back to 2018. This is the original reason this program got disclosed, is because some air marshals were not happy with following Americans who are not suspecting with crimes, and they went to the Boston Globe initially. There was another whistleblower complaint that came out a couple of years ago when an agent in the TSA found out that his own wife was on the list and protested, made a protected disclosure about that. Now we have two people who were involved in this mission, one of whom was actually conducting physical surveillance of Tulsi Gabbard, who reportedly came forward through this association and are negotiating now with who's going to represent them. Now, a number of people in this story have talked to those marshals, including, I believe, Tulsi herself. So there are two whistleblowers by multiple accounts. The question is, what exactly did they know, apart from the fact that there was a mission involving Tulsi Gabbard? We don't know that yet. We don't know why she would be on a list. We don't know why there would be surveillance. There have been instances in the past where there have been mistakes. If you remember, a long time ago, Senator Ted Kennedy was put on a watch list in an earlier non-TSA context. But yes, the source of the story is basically these two marshals and also Tulsi Gabbard herself reporting the behavior, and then comparing notes with the agents themselves.
And what's important to realize here is that these protocols do not have to follow any kind of, well, they ought to, but they don't have to follow. Their view is that they don't have to follow due process guidelines because they're not arresting any of these people or bringing charges. This is just extra watching, extra surveillance. So it's not comporting with any kind of criminal justice standards for due process. It's opaque how you get on it or how you would get off it. I mean, this is also broadly true of the no-fly list in general, something that has been complained. Civil liberties advocates have complained many times that people end up on it for mistaken reasons because they have similar sounding names to known suspected terrorists. The American intelligence authorities not being able to tell one Muhammad apart from another or something like that. Really embarrassing stuff on our part that violates people's civil liberties on the time. So this seems like another manifestation of that. Do we have any evidence that this program, this incredibly expensive program and disruptive program, have they successfully screened out any terrorists or something? Is that, and Tulsi, by the way, doesn't even have, as far as I know, a January 6th connection. If this is about, for some reason, watching everyone who was at the Capitol that day.
Yeah, she doesn't, which makes this a little bit more mysterious. Also the dates a little bit mysterious. She was ostensibly put on July 23rd, which is a day after she gave a pretty aggressive interview criticizing the administration's policies in Ukraine. It's also right after Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee. But, Robbie, you're absolutely right. The key thing to understand about this program and about a lot of other programs, including, by the way, the kill list, which is the worst list of all, which is that they're not intending to go to court. So this never has to be reviewed by anybody. There's no process between putting somebody on a list and having some kind of body review the evidentiary standard that causes a person to come under increased surveillance or be selected for more aggressive activity, right? Including a no-fly list or even what they call lethal action. There isn't a review. There is a due process that is internal, but it's not the kind that we traditionally understand, and that's why these programs, I think, are so dangerous because they sort of run counter to our basic understanding of how these things work in America. Yes, we've always had wiretaps, but they have to go before a judge who has to say that it meets some kind of legal standard. That doesn't happen if you're not planning to go to court. And these things, are designed to kind of stay in the shadows, and they're just collecting information. Is that good? Is that the kind of country we want to have? I'm not sure. I think that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right words to signal to our viewers that this goes well above and beyond the normal bad things we're reporting on. This is an egregious, scary, wasteful, poorly substantiated by evidence or need. And thank you so much for calling attention on it and reporting on it. I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot in the coming weeks. Matt Taibbi, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
News from the Middle East. Israel unleashed a new round of airstrikes on Gaza early Saturday. 80 people were killed and about 50 others were wounded in the attack, per the Palestinian authorities. This is one of the deadliest attacks of the 10-month Israel-Hamas war.
The latest shelling comes as U.S., Qatari, and Egyptian mediators renewed their push for Israel and Hamas to achieve a ceasefire agreement. Also, new reports and videos have surfaced of an ongoing torture of Palestinian prisoners at the hand of the IDF. Here to dive into all of this is The Hill's White House columnist, Niall Stanage. Thanks for coming on, Niall.
Good to be with you.
So let's start with this attack on the school. This came as President Biden has authorized $3.5 billion worth of munitions to Israel. What do you make of that decision and the events over the weekend?
So to that direct point, Jessica, it would appear from footage of the aftermath of this strike and from munitions experts, some of them American, that these were American bombs used in this strike. The death toll you mentioned in the introduction is, I think, upwards of 80 now, CNN reporting at least 93. So it is clearly something that is, the White House will seek to defend it. It will come in for a lot of criticism for that defense, I imagine.
Yeah, that's what we're wondering about. Obviously, the attitude, the stance of the Biden-Harris administration toward the Israeli government has been something that has put Biden at odds with many of the progressive base. We're now in this transition period where Biden remains the president, but Kamala Harris's policies, whatever they might be with respect to the Middle East, are going to be of interest. In the past, we've done this whole White House not really thrilled with Netanyahu or his policies, but not going to actually get in the way of them. Is there any indication that is changing?
I don't think that there is any great suggestion that that is changing in a concrete way, Robbie. It is true that Vice President Harris has sounded a notch or two more sympathetic to the Palestinians and to the suffering of the Palestinians. And in the wake of the strike that we're talking about, she reiterated that the administration's position is that too many civilians have been killed. Well, I mean, that's all very well, but the question then arises, so what are you going to do about it? And the only thing that the administration has ever done throughout this now 10-month conflict is pause one arms shipment. Is Vice President Harris, if she were elected to the top job, going to change that? I mean, I guess she might, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of money on it as yet.
When Matt Miller was asked about this in the press briefing by Ryan Grimm, specifically what's colloquially known as the Rape and Torture Center, that's what Grimm called it when he asked what was going on there. What does the U.S. make of this? Miller said, we're investigating this. We're waiting on an investigation. The fact that Matt Miller knew what the Rape and Torture Center was, there's been a lot of videos on social media that are just horrible to watch. What do you think this means for the United States, who has the conventional arms transfer policy, which says they will not give munitions to human rights violators? Do you expect an investigation to happen in the first place, let alone anything to come of this?
Not from the United States. Sadly, I mean, the administration's default position is that it is up to Israel to investigate these matters. Now, I personally don't see how that is a plausible moral or political position, given the number of times where we have seen Israel and the Israeli government getting caught in lies. I mean, the killing of Hind Rajab, the young Palestinian girl, for example, there was a completely false set of events put forth by the authorities in Israel. The IDF had previously, and I believe continues to, deny there has been any torture in detention facilities. Now, we have a video, one of which you're alluding to, which appears to show a Palestinian detainee being raped. So how you can then fall back on the position that we're waiting for Israel to investigate and expect the American public or the global public to believe you or to think that that is a credible position is mystifying to me.
The state of the ceasefire negotiations is that Hamas recently said they would not take part in the latest round of negotiations, citing various airstrikes and also the targeted assassination of Hamas leaders. If they do not participate in these talks, Israel has signaled, well, then we will just continue with exactly what's been going on. What do you make of the state of potential ceasefire negotiations?
I've always been skeptical, Robbie, about those ceasefire negotiations for a whole lot of reasons. One being that it seems to me the United States administration has kept insisting for a long time that the original ceasefire proposal was an Israeli proposal. To put it charitably, very charitably, the evidence that that's the case is mixed, because the original proposal put forth by President Biden suggested that there would be eventually a total cessation of hostilities in Gaza, and did not appear to make that conditional upon the elimination or destruction of Hamas. It is not remotely clear that that is Benjamin Netanyahu's position. Now, you can then get into the whole broader debate about, does either side really want a ceasefire? Does the Israeli government and Mr. Netanyahu in particular have a vested interest in continuing the conflict for reasons of domestic politics? Does Hamas believe that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated through this conflict? All of those are valid questions. All that I'm saying is I'm skeptical, and have been for a long time, of this purported ceasefire plan.
The Egyptian and Qatari mediators of the ceasefire talks and negotiations seem to indicate that Hamas leaders absolutely want a ceasefire. They're at the table, they want a deal, but actually Bibi Netanyahu's position is more unclear. This is according to CNN reporting. What do you make of his position as the United States' strongest ally? Can the United States force him to agree to a ceasefire deal? Do you think that's possible in the future, or do you think it's really the case that his position's unknown because at the end of the day, he does not want a ceasefire?
I think the United States government could absolutely put more pressure on him and could use much more leverage than it has been willing to do. I do think, Jessica, that the American media broadly has failed, and I would actually exempt Rising from this, but the American media broadly has failed in talking about just how hardline the current government of Israel is. These debates often get cast in a very broad light. Does one stand with Israel or not stand with Israel, etc. This is by any stretch the most right-wing government in the history of the State of Israel. It has at least two people, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who are extremists by any reasonable yardstick. And those people are, to Netanyahu's right, putting pressure upon him, even as he is also under pressure from Israelis, including some hostage families, to do a deal. So the domestic situation in Israel does play a big part in this. Mr. Netanyahu has always been, in my judgment, a rather ruthless and pretty cynical figure. And so I think to expect him to sort of go for a ceasefire for the greater good is an overly optimistic hope.
Niall, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
In his latest social media rant, former President Donald Trump is accusing Vice President Kamala Harris of using AI to create images of fake crowds at her events. On Truth Social, Trump said in part, quote, "Has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport? There was nobody at the plane and she AI'd it and showed a massive crowd of so-called followers, but they didn't exist. Same thing is happening with her fake crowds at her speeches. This is the way the Democrats win elections, by cheating. And they're even worse at the ballot box. She should be disqualified because the creation of a fake image is election interference." Harris's campaign fired back on X, writing, quote, "1, this is an actual photo of a 15,000 person crowd for Harris Waltz in Michigan. 2, Trump has still not campaigned in a swing state in over a week. Low energy?" The New York Times, meanwhile, also disputed Trump's claims, saying Harris is correct about the number of attendees at her events, but Trump's fixation with the crowd sizes is nothing new. You might remember nearly 8 years ago, Trump was fuming over media reports that he had a relatively small inauguration turnout. He also said this at his latest press conference. Let's watch.
I've spoken to the biggest crowds. Nobody's spoken to crowds bigger than me. If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington, and you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people. They said I had 25,000, and he had 1 million people, and I'm okay with it because I liked Dr. Martin Luther King.
Trump's not the only one fixated on crowd sizes, however. Over on Morning Joe, the hosts are comparing Kamala Harris's, quote, mammoth crowds to a Taylor Swift concert. Let's watch.
Mika, I mean, look at the numbers. I mean, the Philadelphia event, I remember when it first came out, it seems like 2 weeks ago, doesn't it? And you saw it was so huge. And then the Wisconsin seemed to be even bigger. Detroit was mammoth. Then Glendale reports of 15,000 people there, more than Barack Obama had in his 2008 campaign. And then the Vegas show last night, and let's just say what it is. These have transcended politics and gotten into popular culture. They just have. It's something that we've talked about before. We talked about with Barack Obama. We talked about how it happened in 1980 with Ronald Reagan. But you have people talking about these things like they're rock shows, like they're Taylor Swift events.
I mean, come on.
Martin Luther King Jr.
breathless
speech
kind of. Oh, go ahead.
had 250,000 people. Trump's on January 6th, there was estimated 53,000 people.
Okay.
I think it's really a bad look for the Trump campaign to be obsessing over this, saying it's fake when it's not AI and it's not fake. There have always been political rallies that are fun for people. There are musical guests, there are speeches that are very exciting. You get to be in a room of people who you're like on the same team on in some vague way. It's like sports, and Americans love sports.
Yeah. So to be clear, the assertion that the crowd in front of the plane is AI generated or fake is not true.
Right.
There is independent verification that the crowds are real. Conservatives have recognized that they are real, non-Trump conservatives. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire points out that the crowds are real. I'm reading from him on Twitter now. They're there because Kamala has the entire media and Hollywood machine building up hype for her. Trump does it in spite of that machine. Point that out, make that the response. The AI stuff makes us look desperate and terrified. Very dumb strategy, very, very dumb. Ian Miles Chong says the same thing. Other conservatives pointing this out on social media that the crowds are real. I think Morning Joe, have that breathless from Mika. Oh my God! Wow, it's so amazing. Yes, those are supporters of Kamala Harris. There are millions of them. There are millions of supporters of Donald Trump. He has drawn massive crowds in the past as well, and shall again, and so will she. They both have a lot of supporters who are excited to vote for them, and it's going to be a very close election with a small slice of the electorate undecided in key swing states, and we don't really know who's going to come out on top yet. There's plenty of enthusiasm for both candidates. Some of it is fake and generated by, I would argue, media that is in the tank for one or the other, but tons of people are going to show up for rallies for either of them.
Right. Well, we did see J.D. Vance's events have rather low turnout comparatively. I don't know why Trump held a rally in Montana. He's having J.D. Vance campaign separately. There's also reports of people who had asked Trump about the weird allegations, and Trump responded, according to people who have not gone on the record with their name but are familiar with the conversation, have said that people are talking about J.D. Vance when they say that. So I think he's looking at J.D. Vance crowd sizes. He has a particular feeling about J.D. Vance right now, seemingly, and he's comparing them to Kamala Harris, really missing the forest for the trees because, like you said, this is a guy with tons of supporters, but he's a TV guy. He cares about how many people show up, and the fact that he's letting it get to him is really telling. But I want to talk about bacon again, Robbie, because He said that MLK's speech, with the March for Jobs and Freedom, that there were 1 million people there. There were 250,000. Similarly, he says the price of bacon is 4 times higher than it is. He just believes everything is 4 times bigger than it is. He does not understand it. He's making a size comparison. I'm talking only about bacon and crowd sizes. This is a guy who is not doing math right and is terribly hurt by Kamala Harris's and Waltz's big crowd sizes.
Why
is he so obsessed with it?
I don't know. He has people.
Because he's a TV guy.
Yeah, he's a TV guy. I mean, Kamala Harris could benefit from doing a TV appearance sometime in the next century. I would love to see her do that.
Her rallies are televised.
She's not sitting down for any interviews with reporters. That would be nice if she did.
You should invite her, Robbie, if you want her to sit down with.
She can come. She's not going to come here. She'd be welcome to come here.
She has to sit over there. That's nice, Robbie. You're not going to give her my seat? Okay.
I'm not going to host the show with her. Well, if she wants to do that, that would be a fun day.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, well, she's not even willing to subject herself to a positive, a reporter who will just ask her sycophantic questions about how she's bratted herself into young people popularity.
And Elon's going to be asking the hard ones with Trump tonight, right? We'll see.
Well, at least they're doing an interview.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's doing rallies. She's talking to the people. Yeah, I think a sit-down interview would be good. I think the problem is the campaign has not sat down and said, this is the policy platform we're running on. We're all on the same page. A lot of their speeches lately have been a little bit vibes-based. They're making some loose promises, but like any campaign, they're going to need to say, how are we going to actually protect abortion? Are we going to leverage the DOJ in the way that Biden promised to but then didn't, to address some of this prosecution of people crossing state lines to get abortions and people trying to get access to health care that's being restricted from the states in a way that people feel they're not considering when their life actually is at risk and they need the abortion, as the law says is still legal in some of these states like Texas. So we need clear policies from them, and I think what's holding it up is now her and Waltz have to combine their agenda with each other. But there's going to be so many consultants that are really fine-tooth combing the exact wording of what they say so that it's the most receivable, and that takes time. And I think they're probably waiting till they do that, which is annoying. Just be real. Just say what you believe. But we know politicians don't do that, so I think that's what the holdup is.
More Rising right after this.
Did Joe Rogan just make an endorsement in the 2024 election? That is how some people interpreted the following remarks. Let's watch.
That's politics. They do it on the left. They do it on the right. They gaslight you. They manipulate you. They promote narratives. And the only one who's not doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You a fan?
Yeah, I am a fan. Yeah, he's the only one that makes sense to me. He's the only one that he doesn't attack people. He attacks actions and ideas, but he's much more reasonable and intelligent. I mean, the guy was an environmental attorney and cleaned up the East River. I mean, he's a legitimate guy. You know, before anybody started calling him an anti-vaxxer, which I thought he was too. I thought he was this nut, this like conspiracy theorist nut, until I read his book. I read The Real Anthony Fauci, and I'm like, what is it? How much of this is real?
RFK Jr. then tweeted out that clip, captioning it in part, quote, "From one legitimate guy to another, thank you, Joe Rogan, for always putting substance first. Let's do this."
The next day, Joe Rogan tried to clarify his comments in that clip on X, writing, quote, "For the record, this isn't an endorsement. This is me just saying that I like RFK Jr. as a person, and I really appreciate the way he discussed things with civility and intelligence. I think we could use more of that in this world. I also think Trump raising his fist and saying fight after getting shot is one of the most American effing things of all time. I'm not the guy to get political information from." That tweet wasn't enough, however, to appease Trump, though. Just 2 hours later, Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "It'll be interesting to see how loudly Joe Rogan gets booed the next time he enters the UFC ring. MAGA 2024. So Trump...
The girls are fighting.
Well...
So I think it's like the Kyle Rittenhouse thing a little bit, because after this happened, I don't know if you were on Twitter, but I was seeing a lot of people super mad at Joe Rogan.
Really?
I don't know if
But Joe Rogan's never been a supporter of Donald Trump.
No.
He didn't endorse him
not.
previously. In fact, he declined
Yeah.
to have him on his podcast a number of times. And he said the reason for that is I don't want to be perceived as propping up or encouraging or benefiting his campaign. He endorsed Bernie Sanders.
But I think some of Trump's supporters are upset because they see where RFK Jr. is pulling away from Trump's vote share in a lot of the polling. And I think they're worried that Joe Rogan's influence is big, and this kind of, if he really does say, I like RFK Jr. out of all the candidates, he makes the most sense to me. Of course not an endorsement. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about Kamala Harris, and people are saying Jessica endorses her, Jessica's going to vote for her. No, I actually said it depends on what she says about Israel-Palestine and what the platform is before I consider that at all. Right. And so, he was definitely a little bit misunderstood there. I don't think this was like he endorsed him and then backpedaled. I think we did see, however, MAGA's response be very similar to Kyle Rittenhouse saying, Trump isn't strong enough on the Second Amendment. I can't support him. And then, a bunch of people were like, we made you, Kyle Rittenhouse. And he was like, all right, never mind.
Yeah, it's this whole punish the defectors type mindset that is very common in both political parties and happens it happens in the Libertarian Party. I'm sure it happens in the Green Party. It just happens all over the place, but it's very silly. Joe Rogan is an independent podcaster and commentator. He's not a conservative. He's not a right wing. There are issue areas where what he thinks seems to overlap more with now what Republicans or conservatives think in terms of free speech and COVID especially. That's what he said he liked about RFK Jr. If Trump is losing votes to RFK Jr. because of his own COVID approach, sorry, man, maybe next time don't outsource the entire response to Dr. Fauci, an unelected bureaucrat who many have credibly suggested might have had something to do with the creation of the pandemic in the first place. That's on him, and he has to own that. RFK Jr. is winning votes from some people on the right. He's winning votes from some people who describe themselves as Democrats. He's winning votes from some people who describe themselves as independent voters or third-party voters, people who would stay at home if he was not on the ballot, as they're trying to make him, by the way. Democrats, Biden, they're trying to fight to keep him off the ballot whenever they can. In New York, we covered that last week. They're trying to get all of his signatures to be on the ballot declared illegitimate because of a completely stupid and trivial matter of the wrong address being listed. It does not matter at all. It's stupid if that ends up having him not on the ballot in New York for that reason. But this shows that both Democrat Biden people and Trump Republican people are afraid of RFK Jr. They feel they deserve, they're entitled, they own those voters. And how dare someone come along and try to argue that you don't have to vote for the Republican or the Democrat. You could vote third party, you could vote independent, you could do something else. And they hate that argument. It's the one thing the two-party system agrees on most strongly, is that the two-party system owns your vote, is entitled to your vote, and the entire system should be set up so that you feel obligated to give your vote to one of the two major parties. So it's swimming upstream. It's fighting uphill. It's a difficult battle, and I think it's good that Joe Rogan provides a platform to alternative voices who are disrespected by, again, not just Democrats, but by Republicans as well. This is a great example of that.
Right. RFK Jr. is on the ballot in Texas now. And Texas is a winner-take-all state. Also, I believe Joe Rogan's based in Austin.
Yes, he is.
And that could make a difference. Him saying, let's look into RFK Jr. I don't know if his base
and not endorsing him, just saying, as he said, just saying, I like him. I like that
read his book, his book. Joe Rogan, while he has some views that are definitely right-wing, he's also the same guy who endorsed Bernie Sanders. Right. You have a lot of people that have more ideological homogeneity than Joe Rogan, but that's also like everyday Americans have views that, that's a far right view, but then they agree with Bernie Sanders, taxing the rich, corporations have too much power. People are all over the map politically. The idea that people are represented by the parties when actually the working class has a political mindset that's more similar to Joe Rogan's and is more all over the place. And he admits, I'm not a political guy. That's why I'm not making endorsements. It's just I've talked to RFK Jr. and this is what I think. But people want leadership. They're not getting that in the media. And I think that's why when people are shown like TV hosts of TV news and they see Jon Stewart thrown into the mix, as he would put it, he wins in those polls, not because people really like him and trust him that much more, but because it's just them saying, I don't like the mainstream media, I don't trust them. And so I trust this guy who maybe isn't the most thorough investigative reporter. He's not on the beat himself. He's more of a comedian than anything, but they trust him giving the news more than anchors. Like
Joe Rogan, I also value this about RFK Jr., and there's plenty I disagree with Kennedy on. I disagree with some of his environmental policies. He used to be very, he might have changed his mind about this, he used to be a very strong supporter of gun control, strong supporter of affirmative action, other policies I don't agree with. But Rogan is right that RFK Jr. criticizes policies he disagrees with. He doesn't personalize it. He makes it about the policies rather than about the person. Even when he's campaigning against, when he's criticizing Trump and Biden, it's not about them specifically, it's about their policies. And I think a lot of people appreciate that strategy, that way of campaigning. He seems like someone you could talk to about ideas and policies, and not just relentlessly focused on trying to jab the other guys the way both Trump and Biden, or now Trump and Harris, are. And that's something people appreciate about him, even if you don't agree with him on everything. I certainly don't agree with him on everything, but I see why he is registering with a lot of disaffected Americans who don't like the choice that is being forced upon us between what was Trump and Biden is now apparently Trump-Harris.
My favorite phone call, the phone call that leaked between Donald Trump and RFK Jr., where he's seemingly asking for RFK Jr. to drop out in an endorsement, some kind of horse trading going on, like, oh, well, if you end your campaign, we'll give you a position in the administration. It's going to be so big for you, Bobby. We covered that when it came out. But Joe Rogan just saying, out of all the candidates, he seems the most reasonable. Now Trump is saying, you're going to get booed so much, everybody's going to hate you now. Just because he says he thinks RFK Jr. is the most reasonable, this is someone Donald Trump entertained potentially putting in his administration, who he has a personal relationship with and makes phone calls to. I think that tells us a lot about Donald Trump, that he was considering this because he is threatened by the vote share RFK Jr. is seemingly getting in the polls.
Yeah. That does it for us today on Rising. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it, but we're just getting the week started, and we will be back tomorrow with lots more to cover. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Yeah, and you can listen while on the go because we're available wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, we don't have our usual script that we read up right now, so we're just kind of doing it from memory, but
ingrained
you guys
in
get
my
the deal.
mind.
You know what you're doing. All right, talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.